A lot of changes have happened over the year with Google Docs and the format of court reports and everything, and a lot of that was my doing. So I just wanted to have a pretty casual conversation about the court report process and the expectations, and then get feedback from you guys about what frustrations you have or what could be done to make things better. And just emphasize that the court report is really our product. That is what we do. We provide information to the court, and we have to get them in a timely manner, which is always an issue. I would say nationwide is kind of an issue, because a lot of us don't do a lot of writing. The information, we always want to get the most up-to-date information, or we're waiting on other people to get the information that we need, and then the editing process as well, we'll talk about, but the staff has to have enough capacity to be able to edit, turn around, and get reports filed on time as well. So I will start off. How many of you have been to CASA College online? Couple? 3? I would encourage you to go to CASA College. This is a site from Texas CASA, and it has webinars on best practices for all kinds of things, for staff, for board members, and for CASA volunteers. And it's something that you can do for continuing education, and it counts towards your 12 hours. Okay? There is one that I want to show you. I'm not going to play it, but I'll show you. If you're a new user, you sign up. It's pretty easy by entering your email, and then you'll be able to log in after that. Let me see. Give me one. Okay. I thought I was logged in under myself. I'm going to switch over to my account. My password and stuff isn't saved. Well, you'll go in and enter your username and password, and then log in, and you can search for different types of training, and then just browse their catalog as well. And so there is a training on there about best practices for court reports, and it's an hour-long thing. It's an hour-long webinar. It's not all about court reports. It's about CASA being a volunteer and what the expectations are of the court. And it's done by Judge Darlene Byrne, who is the judge in Travis County, but she's also the president of the National Juvenile and Family Court Judges Association nationwide. And so it's a really good hearing from a judge about what they would like to see in their court report and what's important in writing the report. So I would highly encourage you to go on CASA College and watch it. Okay. So the second thing I want to talk about is our Memorandum of Understanding with CPS. So Texas CASA and Christine Blackstock, who's the head CPS, DFPS person in Texas here, or she's an associate, not the commissioner, she's associate commissioner. The commissioner of DFPS is Hank Whitman, and he's new. Well, he's been here about a year and a half, Texas-wide. So CPS signs off on this statewide. It's an agreement between CASA and CPS, and it is what allows us to have access to the records and the children that CPS has custody of. So if you're ever interested in reading this, it's a good read, actually. But it details a lot of what the expectation is of CASA, and we are supposed to be abiding by it. There's also the expectation of CPS. They're supposed to be abiding by it. We both don't, but we should at least try, right? So I have no control over CPS. I do have control over CASA here, at least. So I want to make sure we're making our best effort to understand what's expected of us, and then put processes in place that allow us to meet what we say we're going to. So as far as court reports go, it says that CPS shall provide to CASA copies of its written reports 10 calendar days prior to a court hearing, as required by the Texas Family Code. So that is not happening. From what who has seen a court report from CPS 10 days in advance, or in general? Does anybody get CPS reports before hearings?
Not in the last couple of years.
Chantel's the only one.
Are you saying like the report, the general
Like a court-
form that they fill out?
A court report.
Like written like ours, or like their form?
Their court report.
Their court.
So raise your hand if you don't read CPS court reports.
Or if you don't
If
get
you
it.
Don't get them. Don't get them.
Wait, the 10 days or don't ever get them?
Ever.
Never got them.
Never seen them. So they do court reports. They do court reports too. And they're supposed to get them to us and the parties in the court before we write our report. So, I don't know why that's not happening, but we'll definitely work on it. I know it was addressed at least 6 months ago with the program director of CPS in our region. So we'll see. I have noticed in this area it's a little different. I don't know why they're not either being e-filed, which we would get them, or they're not being dispersed to CASA in general on a consistent basis.
And how would that affect our report?
So ideally, what they do is they submit a report with a lot of the same things that we're looking for, like the placement information, the last medical issues, an update on the services of the parents. All of that is supposed to be in a CPS report. If we get it 10 days ahead, we don't have to be tracked. We don't have to track down the CPS worker, but we can verify that information and just weigh it against ours, because there may be differences. We've had it to where CASA reports are inaccurate or CPSs are inaccurate, and it's a checks and balance kind of thing. So it's not necessarily for the judge to read, it's really for the parties, but it's required by law that we both are submitting court reports. It may be that we find that they are in the file, they're being submitted to the court, but not emailed to all the parties, but they're supposed to be. So the other part of that is CASA shall provide copies of its written court reports to CPS as soon as possible, but not later than 5 calendar days prior to a court hearing. Did everybody hear that? So,
We're perfect on this side. Do that.
5 calendar days means that that court report has to be approved and filed within 5 days. And I'm okay counting weekends, but the fact that we approve our court reports, the process behind that, just so everybody knows, is that once you submit your first draft of your report to your supervisor is to review it and then have a conversation with you about any changes or edits that they see. The writing a court report is like a learned skill. It's like interviewing. There is writing that's appropriate for court reports, and some of the editing that we do is to make sure all the court reports are consistent in the language that's used, and it's something that you learn. It's like learning a different language. But because the judges read like 14 for one court day, we want them to be kind of consistent format, certainly, but the wording needs to be really concise and in sort of like legal terms, just very concise, to the point, not a lot of emotion, not a lot of fluff, because if the judge is reading multiple for one day, they don't have time for that necessarily. That's not what that report is for, right? So when your supervisor is working with you to edit that, they need some time, because the supervisors have, on average, 24 to 28 cases going at one time. So for the court hearing that you're writing your report for, they may have 6 hearings for that same day. That means 6 court reports that they're working on at the same time. After you guys finalize it with your supervisor, you think it's okay, they're gonna send it to Kate or to whoever is available to review it on another level. And that person is reading all of them for the whole program. And so if you keep in mind that that person also has to approve the report or go back and forth with changes, ideally you're starting this process 10 days at least before the court hearing to get it within 5 days of being filed and approved. So I don't think a lot of CASA volunteers have been explained the whole process of what that looks like and why it's so important to get the reports in a timely manner, because we all know it. We all know we're supposed to do our court reports in. But the process, it gets backlogged really quickly, and then the aspect that is unfortunate for court and for the other parties is that when we're submitting a court report the day before and attorneys are reading information for the first time sometimes, or things are not accurate, there's no time to address it beforehand. Because ideally, the collaboration between attorneys and CPS and CASA is that we'll file a report. If it's not perfect, that's okay. If we can navigate solving whatever issues we have before we get to court, then it can be resolved. It doesn't all have to be come out in court. And I can tell you, the attorneys we work with hate the judge making decisions for these cases when it has to come out in front of them. They'd rather try to work it out, but when it does need to come out, it will.
So the court report that we write and the court report, the CPS, they both go to the judge. Isn't that just sort of a duplication? I mean, it's not, I don't get it, why there's 2, I guess.
So, CASA reports,
We work with the best interest, it's
Yeah.
CASA, and they have guidelines that they have to meet regarding psychologicals, medicals, dentals, and they go into a little bit more detail than what we do. We address it on behalf of what's gonna be in the best interest in their well-being, where they're addressing the legal and the framework. They are the parent, is the legal document, and that's what they refer back to.
yeah, our
But
role,
shouldn't theirs
and
be in the best interest of the child?
Theirs is in the best interest, but their role is not just for the child, theirs is for the entire family. We represent the children, yes, and CPS represents the entire family in regards to what the permanency goal is and things to that effect. And they have to report according to that by the guidelines, because they have deadlines that they
So
have.
theirs is much more detailed, much more
Yes, theirs is,
information.
right, theirs
Okay.
is more focused on the service plans and each individual child and needs and things to that effect. We speak to those things,
Right.
but we also add the extra piece of, is this benefiting the child, or is there something else that should be added to benefit the child?
yeah, it's they don't have a concern section,
Yes.
Okay.
necessarily a recommendation section.
Oh, okay.
So we
Okay.
bring concerns about the service plan or about the fact that information's not in the CPS court report, or the fact that the child hasn't been seen by a doctor, or
Okay.
the parents, maybe are attending therapy, but they're lying in therapy, or whatever, we bring up, we fill in the gaps and then raise concerns for the court.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
that's what, and your court reports are mostly so I'll bring up, the a court report, just so we can look at it. This is one for our fake Harris Price case. So the court reports, you should now, when you get a new case, have a template of the adversary court report, and it should be in Google Docs. That court report should be a working document. So you have one Google Doc template. What you should have in your file on Google Docs is something like this. All of the PDF file stamp versions of court reports. So when we finalize a court report, we get it filed, it has a file stamp on it of when it was filed, it's saved in your documents, and you're working off of one Google Doc. Not 5 Word documents, not different versions, you know, different versions. It is one Google Doc that can be altered, and then the records of the saved ones. So this can clear up a lot of confusion about different formats. Now, Google Docs, it's something we've been transitioning to all year. And I understand that a lot of people have been doing it a lot. I did it several different ways for the past decade. This, the next phase of changing things or updating, streamlining is that all CASA volunteers are going to be assigned a Gmail address. And it's going to be bfcbrazos.org. So the CASA Voices for Children, all the staff has, you know, the A Reynolds at bfcbrazos.org. So we're going to start assigning you a CASA email. Because we have so many different versions of email addresses, and we don't necessarily want you using your personal address. We ask that you make up another email, and sometimes it's Gmail, sometimes it's not. Well, I want to be able to capture your emails, and for you only to be working on your CASA case in one email, not personal emails. So for safety reasons, for consistency, for everybody working in the same format, you'll be assigned a Gmail address, and it will be your first initial, last name, _ CASA at bfcbrazos.org. It'll also streamline, you know, if you're trying to email somebody at CPS, you know what their email format is, right? If you know how to spell their name, you should be able to figure out their email, because it's all dfps.state.us. whatever. So we're changing to that. So all new CASA volunteers in the last class are going to be assigned a Gmail account, or already have been, and they're going to get started that way. For those of you who are currently working with your email, I understand. I think we'll probably wait if you want to switch to that immediately. We've already got your emails assigned, and we can get you going. But when you take your next case, we're going to ask that you start with your Gmail address. And that way we can share the whole Google Drive file with you. You'll have the same access to the file as the supervisors do. So when you open up this template for your CASA report, you both can edit it at the same time. There's no saving, there's no downloading, there's no versions of anything. You can see the edits at the same time, you can work in it in the same time, and we'll have trainings on that. It just helps clean things up, because the time it takes to figure out what version you're using and the reformat or the type, I mean, it's a lot of time spent on that when we should be doing something else, right? Yeah. So that's how it should look. And I know it's a process, but when you go into your court report, so say you get on a case after the adversary. You'll have a file stamp version of the adversary court report there. You should go in. Your supervisor should update at least the next court. I don't want to pull up, well, actually I can pull up. This one is a fake case. So the case name, cause number won't change. This will say adversary hearing, and we'll change it to status hearing. Status is the next hearing to do, and then update the court date with the next court date that we'll have right after the adversary is finished. And then everything else, you'll know the next court date should be within 60 days of that initial adversary. You'll go in, look at the birth dates of your kiddos, make sure that's updated if they've had a birthday at the next court hearing. If placements have changed, you can state that they're where they are and when that happened. If they stay the same, then you don't have to change it. If there's any legal change, as far as going from TMC to PMC, the history will be done for you by the EFE and the EFE supervisor, so that shouldn't change. If there is new history, that can be added. So say if some kids are returned home, or siblings are adopted, or something like that, if something significant legally happens in the history, you can add it to it. If siblings remain in care, you know, if the case doesn't close, but something significant legally happens.
Isn't that typically the intake history, like if they've had any type of?
It's any history. So it's a timeline, it's the start of the timeline. So if there is something, previous DFPS history, if something happens significantly in it, in the history of the case, which is kind of rare, but especially with when siblings are separated, if something happens or causes another allegation, we want to keep adding to the history.
So I think that's what I was clarifying, so it
Yeah.
is just intakes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Permanency plan, whether we're in agreement with that or not, or when it changes, that's talking with CPS. The contacts are since the last review. So you'll be updating that as you go for the next court hearing. And then the summary, any changes, so that can be, when you go in and open up that, this Google document from the adversary hearing, you should open it up once you get your case, look at, you know, of course read it, but knowing in 60 days you're going to have another court hearing and court report. What in the education, like if you say today you get this from court on Wednesday and you come in and take a case, from now until 60 days from now, what's most likely going to happen if kids are school age?
They're gonna start school.
You're going to start school. So you should know what grade they're going into, if they require an ARD meeting within 30 days, if they've changed schools since the last summer, if they're behind, if you already know there's some concerns, you know, thinking about their education. The mental health, within the first 60 days, you know, have they had a psychological, have they had an assessment, you know, what is it about their mental health, have we checked Health Passport? Who has looked at Health Passport, or at least reports from Health Passport? Okay. Several of you. So Health Passport is the Medicaid website that we have access to now. So anytime that you're coming up on a court report or you have concerns about the physical or mental health care, we can log in. The staff can, and we can look at the full medical record for Medicaid. So if the children were on it before, or when they get into care, they're definitely put on it. So sometimes we can see history. Kelsey, right now, when we get a new case, she's logging in to see if there's any previous diagnoses in there. And sometimes there is, and sometimes there's not. So that can see vaccine records, it can see medication, it can see diagnoses, it can see all kinds of stuff. So we can run that for physical and mental health. And we should be for every court hearing, at least, to check to see. It'll show you when their last well check was, when their last dental check was. So all of that following up, you don't have to track down the doctors, you don't necessarily have to ask the foster parents. We can get a report, and then you can see what you need to follow up on, if they're behind or whatever. You know, foster parents stay pretty on top of that stuff. But if there's an issue a foster parent's bringing up, or if they're with a relative or a non-offending parent or something, or on a return and monitor, and you need to check, verify if they were taken to the doctor or if they were prescribed a medicine or whatever, we can log into the same site the doctors are logging into. So just know
You said staff only, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we only have one login, and
Okay.
if we screw with that, there, it's gone forever. Cause it's medical history, so. But updating on physical health is their well check, any issues going on with your body, medication, mental health is therapy, psychotropic medication, concerns, the placement, how do they fill in their placement, are there any issues with their placement, and visitation. Since the last review, have we observed the visitation? Have we reviewed the reports on visitation from the observers? Are there any concerns? Should it be increased? Should it be decreased? Should it be changed? Should somebody else get visitation? Healthy attachment. So have we asked the kid about their prior attachments? Or do they have contact with their siblings? Do they have contact with their grandparents? Would they say that they have healthy relationships outside of you and their foster parent or caregiver? Are we working on building those healthy attachments for when they go home or for the future? What can we say about them? Or do we say that they don't have anybody outside of that? So that's for each kid. Some of you have very long court reports. But that's what we do. So then you get to, this one has 3. Oh, the parents. The parent section has a little bit about them, about meeting with them and what services they've been ordered to do. And then we update on those services, on each one. And if you don't have it, like we can't wait till the day before court because we're waiting to follow up. If we don't have it to report at the time that we need to turn in the hearing, we just have to say we don't have it. And then we can say we didn't get a court report from CPS, for one, but we want it, it may be that if we say we don't have it, we don't have an update on that, between 5 days and the court hearing, people will get this report and attorney's mother, the mother's attorney or CPS may be able to see that we're reporting that there's no update on this, and that doesn't look very good for their client, and they can clarify with their clients, but they need to have the time to do that. Let's see, looking at employment and transportation, these are kind of barriers that we usually see to reunifying with kids. It's not reason to terminate, it's not a court-ordered service necessarily, but employment and transportation can be barriers. So can we verify, are they employed, have they been employed, do they have transportation, and reporting that? Because sometimes, like Judge Delaney will ask about, well, what are we doing? What recommendations can we have? The CPS can give bus passes, or can we change to in-home, services, or whatever it is. We're working on the barriers to reunification. Housing, I think same issue. What is the housing situation? How long have they lived there? Are there any barriers to housing? And what are they? And what are we doing to give resources for them to get help with housing? Mental health, same. Have they been to therapy? Have they done their psychological evaluation? Have they had diagnoses? That kind of stuff. We won't look in, it may be that they have a record for in health passport, but we will not look at it without their consent, signed consent. But it is possible. So their education, it's important to know going in what the education level of your parent is, because that's where your expectations start with whether they are capable of doing a lot of things. But it's good to know. And whether they want to work on it. Have we referred them to a GED program, or do they have a degree? And what skills do they have? For each parent, so not just the one that we're kind of working on, that's a primary caregiver, for each parent. Because it's going to bite us in the butt come trial if we don't evaluate them equally. And you usually find some interesting information if you work on all parents at the same time.
Agent?
Yes.
I have a question. I'm just reading that. That seems to say to me
the educational services that CPS is requiring. It doesn't say much about their background, and that brings up a question. When, you were talking about in the history or in the beginning, what I have found is I get too thorough, and then they want, some of the same information's gonna come out in some of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I'm learning, or maybe you have something to say about that, but.
So I see, so this is a good format. This is a court report on a fake case that a new CASA volunteer wrote. So I don't listen, or don't read too much into the content of this. But yeah, the education part, I'm trying to think if I understand your question.
Well, for example, if I had put in the situation or the history, both parents have high school degrees and some skills, and I would leave it at that. And so when it gets down to education, I would be talking more about what they're doing within their service plan.
I think she's referring to the old court report, because in the old court report, there was a situation in the history to which you took out.
Yeah, we changed the situation and history of the case to just like dates of when the allegations happened. And,
because I don't have a case right now, so I see.
yeah, the previous court reports had a lot of narrative content on the front end, and that's repetitive and
That's
not needed. So we just have the previous DFPS history of the allegation, what the allegation, who it was concerning, and then subsequent allegations, because it's important to know, is this your first rodeo?
Yeah.
Or are you rodeo bound? Like, is this happening too much?
Actually, and that kind of brings up the point where Will and I are. This is their second rodeo. Do we have the privilege to find out what happened in the first go-round? CPS would
Yes.
be the way?
So, yes, CPS would have that information, as long as it's in Texas.
It is.
Okay. It may get sticky, well, no, CPS should have it in general, in impact.
Thank you.
Well, out of state, yeah, Texas, yes, out of state.
Out of state, no.
Right.
Yes, and then depending on how far back their history goes, give them some time when you send the request, because everything didn't transfer to Impact. So there's old case files that they have to request from storage.
Okay.
So, yes,
Thank
but
you.
they have a record.
So in this format, just so to make sure I'm clear, the only thing that stays from report to report is the history piece and the case data up front.
Yes.
Everything else is fresh, updated as of to this report.
Yes. Because we have on record your last report. We don't need one long report that keeps getting added to, and it keeps it concise or short, just since the last few minutes. So, we go back down, parents. Yeah, the education in this is not really what we're talking about, but this was his first go around. He did a pretty good job for training. But also, so that's, court order services, employment, mental health, education, visitation from their end. Like you can, the visitation section for the children is how do they see it? How is it going for them? And do they have visitation with other people? You know, do we think that's appropriate or should we ask for? Visitation in the parent section is how are they doing with visitation? And the observations from us and from the, are they getting there on time? Do they need it? Do they have, you know, if we have transportation issues, should it be moved? Are the kids out of town? Is there something that we can do to make a recommendation about how we can make this visitation better? Do we want to increase it? You can get really creative with visitation, as long as parents are doing what they need to do. Can we expand it? Can we get another relative to get approved to supervise it? That kind of thing, especially when we have kids placed far out and in separate placements. It's a huge headache to get 3 kids and 3 placements to 1 visit every week for an hour. Gosh. So you can work with your supervisor to kind of think about creative options for visitation. And then here's Dad. Same kind of issue. What's CASA's experience? And if you notice, we just say CASA, not the CASA, not I. No, we use first person. We just say CASA. CASA made several attempts to contact Mr. Harris through email and phone calls, but all were unsuccessful. So he said this CASA again, we just have to say CASA. Is that my phone? Oh. Sorry, I'm talking to my kiddos.
AJ,
Yes.
in all the cases that I've had, the fathers have been incarcerated. How do you handle that?
You send them a letter, or you go visit them.
Am I required to go to
Yes.
jail and see these guys?
If you can, if they're placed in Lubbock, you don't have to, but definitely send them a letter. You can email them, we have an account, because we have to make the same effort for every parent, even if we know that they're not getting out. Because they're a source of information, for one, about their family, because not the whole family's not in prison. And then they may have information that you don't know about. But also, just so we make a diligent effort for each parent that has, they still have rights. Until they don't, they gotta be treated equally.
Now, I write the letter and mail it, or do I contact you guys and you write the letter? Or we write the letter together? I mean, do I just go start writing letters to jail?
Yeah.
I mean,
You can. We have a template with questions. So
yeah,
you
I mean,
have
I
a-
wouldn't have a clue what to ask.
It is, do you have a relationship with this child? Are you aware of what brought the children into care? What is your plan to care for your child? That kind of stuff.
So the initial one, there's a letter that goes out and states that CASA's been assigned to their child that is involved in this case, yada, 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 gives the whole spiel that we give everybody else. Then there's a questionnaire that we typically ask for them to send back, and parents will tell you from that point forward what their stance is. Some parents, you do want to follow up because they do work services in jail. Like if they're in Brazos County, they actually have parenting and counseling, certain classes and courses that they can take. So yes, because some of them actually do work services because they want to maintain their rights even if they're not able to be placed in. So.
Yeah, especially if they're in county jail here.
One
Those here.
question about the incarceration, because in my case, the mom, but is CPS not required to go visit these people?
Yes, CPS is required to go visit them.
But it depends on where they're at and all that. As far as this CPS over here, she says, no, I'd have to get permission, and then she gets somebody else to go.
Now,
and then the
depending
woman
on where they
keeps-
are, it's the same thing here. So many miles, yes, they have to get permission, but it either is through correspondence or they have to go see them face to face. So yes, they are responsible for making contact with that parent monthly as well, even if they are in jail. Now, they may go through the attorney for some of the contact, but yes.
Well, the problem is in the county I'm working in, they don't assign everybody an attorney like they do in Brazos.
Right, and so then the caseworker is responsible, and then CASA is responsible for corresponding.
Yeah. Okay.
But just, we have to verify if that parent has ever had a relationship with that child.
Yeah.
If we can rule it out, then you're done. But you
So
have to
if
rule
they
it out.
haven't had a relationship with him ever, if
You
they
don't
went to jail when
necessarily-
he was 4 and now he's 17, I
Yeah,
mean, I still need to write him every month.
not every, I mean, making that initial contact,
Right,
you would
he
be,
did that.
and they respond, but they've never had a relationship. Some of them wanna get involved because it's something to do. I mean,
Well, I had a dad who did not have a relationship because as his child was born, he went into jail. But he did not want his parental rights terminated, period. That was just the end of it. We actually ended up doing a PNC agreement with him, the mom, and the grandparents. The grandparents has custody of the child, but both parents still have their rights, and he has visitation outlined for whenever he comes out of jail. His rights are intact because we have a year to work a case. That legal document stands. It doesn't change after it's standing or somebody goes to modify it. So whenever he gets out of jail or he paroles, he now has visitation in place and he can follow up those guidelines. So that's why it's important to kind of see what their relationship is, and they have the same rights as anybody else as a parent, whether they have not been in their lives or not. If he doesn't want to cut that tie, he doesn't have to. Now,
yeah, that's
granted,
the,
there's-
where we have to, we
yes.
can't determine best interest with that. We don't do due diligence to examine every parent. Parents have rights, so we just have to do it. It doesn't mean you have to like them.
Mhm.
If It doesn't mean anything like that. But you get on a stand and say you want to terminate a parent's rights and you haven't made an effort to even examine the situation, that's a problem, right? So also, the family members of each parent have rights as well. So you may find that your guy in prison or your mom in prison has relatives. They may be the black sheep of the family, but there's plenty of family on that side that we should know about. And maybe they've had a relationship with the children, we don't know about it. So just because a parent is in jail doesn't mean they don't have an extended family. And the law says that we're required to contact that extended family. So we should be doing that. And it can lead to whole other avenues for children. And we can get that information from contacting the parents, right? It's part of the question is, are there any other members of your family that you think would be appropriate to be involved with a child? Doesn't mean we give them access to children. We will look into it though. So that's really important. That is a shift from CASA and CPS, kind of in general. I'm not saying this is the way it's always been the law, but our focus on advocacy, getting back to the Texas Family Code and what is our role and what our doing our due diligence means is this. So we're getting rid of a lot of the administrative documentation and things that have bogged us down, so we can really focus on doing our due diligence right out of the gate with contacting parents, getting the contact information, sending letters or emails to incarcerated parents, and exploring family members and the networks these kids come from, because that keeps them in their community if at all possible. And then we're able to say at a trial that it's really in their best interest that we terminate this legal relationship, because most of the families that we serve are disadvantaged minority children and their families. So it's just important that we do an objective job all around, and not just focus on what we think is in their best interest. We have to do our research and verify information, and our court reports need to show it. And it's a good indication for Kate, myself, or anybody reviewing court reports program-wide about how we're doing on all of that. And so it's gotten, making sure everybody has the same format and everybody knows the expectations and all of that. To change anything takes time, but that's where we're going, because it's outlined that that's our role in the law. So, has Dad been given court-ordered services? Has anybody gone to trial on a parent and CPS didn't order services in the beginning? I know. How long has that case been going on?
6 years.
6 years for one child. Because court-ordered services weren't given to a parent. So from the very beginning, we want to make sure parents are ordered to do things, because that's the only way you can terminate their rights. So we need to make sure in a status report, has that been developed and has it been signed off on, their plan of service? Because we need to follow up on it, and it needs to be enough to where you can go back if they haven't done it and terminate their rights. It's really important to do things well on the front end.
That was a big lesson, that whether CPS was responsible for doing it, even if they don't do it, we have to make sure.
We bring it up in court and say it's our concern. Nothing has been ordered on the parent. And why? Well, if there are barriers, how can we navigate these barriers, or what's our purpose? Why are we here? To monitor children? But it's not our purpose. Keep things safe and navigate to a permanent option for kids, and not legal limbo for years.
Yeah, sometimes the court-ordered services for an absent parent is just as simple as they will make contact with the department to set up a service plan, yada, 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 and that's enough. It's gotta have something in order, in court-ordered,
Yeah.
filed.
Because also, if there's an assumption that the parent hasn't been involved and they can't be found or whatever, we'll order them to do something anyway, because they may be found 8 months into the case. They may want to be involved, and their family may want to be involved, and it will totally disrupt the child who's made attachments with whatever caregiver they're with. So
how would you phrase that? You would say,
I request that if they're located, they have a drug test immediately before contact with the child, or?
I mean, you can even do something before that, like CASA, CASA's concerned that no court-ordered services have been established. We ask that the court order that the parent make contact with the department on a regular basis, and then establish services once contact is made or something like that, like even contacting them, because that will, it can come up that a parent was never contacted, so how would they know? So the orders are, in order to establish services, there needs to be something even before that they make contact with the person.
Another example in this case that's gone so long is that the father is unknown.
Right.
And we knew that CPS had done due diligence, but we never got a paper saying that there's nothing in the file.
Right, because they would have had to file paternity registry and show that there was no father on record. And then if they did a diligent search, that diligent search would be documentation that they did search for a father. And in the court order, it would state unknown father, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, making sure we're following up on those, even if, don't just let it ride, like make sure it's in the court report and that we're following up with, okay, we have an unknown father, what's being done? And understanding, we probably have a training on unknown fathers and what to do with them. Because it's an issue. What should we ask for in a court report?
So if we have a parent that CPS can't seem to find, do we have an obligation to research them also?
Yes, it's not just on CPS to find those parents. So we're not required to, but we definitely should make an effort. We have better resources than CPS does to find those parents. And it's in the child's best interest because we process all of that. If we find it and give the information to the DA's office, they get on their service and all of that, and it can be resolved so kids can get adopted. Because until that's done, you can't terminate a parent's rights.
So if he has active warrants and doesn't want to be found, and we find him, what's our status?
We don't worry about calling their warrants on them.
Okay.
Or immigration status either. It's not our role to tell on parents. It's our role to raise concerns. If they have warrants, or if we look them up in our TLO system and we have their number, we just verify and pass the information on. That's not our role to do that. It really destroys our credibility of being an objective reporter to the court. Now, if another attorney does it or CPS does it, CPS doesn't do it either. We're here for the children, and that's not necessarily in the child's best interest to do it. It's just not our role, though.
Are you saying that if a child, it's on the court report, father is unknown? Because mom says, I can't remember all the guys. I don't know, we've tried 3. That child, because his father is unknown, can never be adopted?
Unless CPS shows the efforts they've made to make a diligent effort to figure it out.
Okay.
And then the father's rights can be terminated.
Yeah, because it's unknown, okay. I just thought if it was unknown, then they could never get adopted, but that's not true.
Yeah, they have to be dealt with.
In the case I'm working on, there's 2 unknown fathers. There's actually a paternity test done, all this, and they have assigned them attorneys. And so I'm pretty sure their parental rights will be, terminated.
Yeah, our unknown father had an attorney.
The court's assigned to ours. They're being represented.
Sorry, my kids are supposed to be picked up. Please text me. Okay. So the rest of the report, each parent. Okay. So areas of concern. Areas of concern should already be brought up in the content of the report. You can't report on the kids and then say there's a concern about something, but it's not addressed in the court report. So in each section, whatever your concern is, you have to show the effort, like how you got that information, how you verified it, and what efforts have been made, and what the concern is up in the report. And then it's, in case the judge is short on time, he can flip to the back page and say, okay, what are these concerns? And he can go up to the content of the report if there is something that he needs to know something more about. So if I say Mrs. Price's substance abuse, I should be able to go up to Mrs. Price's, the mom's, section of the court report and see under court ordered services that she was ordered or asked to do a test, completed the test, and what the results were. Or that she was asked to, she hasn't been asked to do a test in the past 6 months. We're just going off this history. Well, that's on CPS. So our concern is that they haven't been asked to do a drug test. That can come back to bite you in a trial as well. We were court ordered to do something but never sent to do the test. Or the results haven't been given to CASA. Or whatever the concern is, it better be in the content of the report if we have a concern. Explaining why is it, well sure, substance abuse is not good. But what exactly is the concern? Should be up in mom's section. Inability to maintain employment and complete services. What efforts, how do we know that?
She only went to that half of her parenting classes that were court orders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, inability to complete her services. Well, she was asked, we have the court ordered services listed. If she was asked to go to parenting classes, have we called the parenting class provider and verified the amount of classes that she's attended? Not that we just heard that she's not going. So, maintaining employment, is there an issue that's a barrier to employment, and how can we, if it's a concern, it also, for the most part, there should be a recommendation about what to do about it. So you can't just raise concerns. What do we want to recommend? And that's the next section. So the next section usually says that they maintain custody of the kids, that the current placement be approved or changed, that the mother attend an inpatient substance abuse. That's a recommendation because of a concern, right? That the father engage in court-ordered services. And this is really something you